And friends, there's breaking news from Rome where Pope Francis's newly released memoir is making waves. It's filled with controversial and deeply troubling statements. It's a mix of shocking claims and leftist rhetoric that actually would be laughable if it weren't so sad and scandalous. In his memoir, Pope Francis takes aim at the Latin Mass, actually singling out young people devoted to the Mass of the Ages. He says, actually, he makes this rather thinly veiled attack on President Donald Trump, comparing him to Mussolini and Hitler, actually, just as he did in 2017. And that's done in the context of justifying his blessing of homosexual unions. But that's not all. His take on COVID-19 vaccines and climate change aligns completely with far leftist ideology. So for the full story, head over to LifeSite News, where Rome correspondent Michael Haynes breaks down the most revealing quotes and their implications. But I wanted to give you a preview of that here. And these are direct quotes from the Pope's memoir. And if you look back in 2017, just Google it, you'll find it. He made the same comparison between Hitler and Donald Trump. But he says, whereas Mussolini and Hitler are greeted with jubilation at the time he's talking about, the two central characters that are dealing with public discourse. So anyway, he's talking about Mussolini and Hitler. And he says, it is strange that nobody worries about the blessing of an entrepreneur who exploits people, and this is a grave sin, or about someone who pollutes our common home, while there's a public scandal if the Pope blesses a divorced woman or a homosexual. So there he is, bashing Trump, comparing him to Hitler, at the same time as justifying his blessing of a divorced woman or giving them Holy Communion and homosexual couples as well. Nonetheless, he goes on. He then talks about the Latin Mass. Now get this, for all the lovers of the Latin Mass, the Pope really comes out here revealing his actual hatred of the Latin Mass. And I say that, I'll let the words speak for themselves. He says, it's now been ruled that the possibility of celebrating Latin Mass following the Missal prior to the Second Vatican Council must be expressly authorized by the Dicastery for Divine Worship, who will allow it in only special circumstances, for the reason that it is unhealthy for the liturgy to become ideology, he says. He goes on. And now he's bashing young people who are attached to the Latin Mass. He says, it's curious to see this fascination for what is not understood, for what appears as somewhat hidden, and seems also at times to interest the younger generations. This rigidity is often accompanied by elegant and costly tailoring, lace, fancy trimmings, and brochets, he says. That saying that it's about fancy stuff is exactly the same as Judas complaining that the expensive perfume was wasted on Christ when he was anointed. Then he goes on, and then he basically gives a cornucopia of the left in describing climate change. He talks about climate change as a catastrophe and the need to address it, just like we did COVID-19. He says, and I quote, the global catastrophes of COVID and of climate change are screaming out to us that we can wait no longer. The moment is now. The pandemic and its drama should have taught us that if we have the means to tackle, that we have the means to tackle the challenge, and that we will be more resilient if we all do it together. Now, what was the way we tackled the COVID-19? Well, guess what he says? He says, and I'll quote, while the pandemic began to recede thanks to the assistance of vaccines, together with the strong appeals that they be made available to everyone in every region of our planet, especially the weaker and poorer. He goes on. And finally, I wanted to show you, he really does hate the Latin Mass. He tells this story of an American cardinal. Just listen to the story and you can decide for yourself. But for me, it speaks to a hatred of the Latin Mass and just an insult. And anyway, I'll let you decide for yourself. He says, and I'll quote, a cardinal in the United States told me that two newly ordained priests came to him one day and asked for authorization to celebrate the Mass in Latin. Do you understand Latin? The cardinal asked. No, but we will study it, the two young priests replied. All right, said the cardinal, but before you learn Latin, look at your diocese and see how many Vietnamese migrants there are, and study Vietnamese first of all. And when you have learned Vietnamese, consider also the multitudes of Spanish-speaking parishioners, and you'll realize that learning Spanish will be very useful for your service. After Vietnamese and Spanish, come back to me and we'll talk about Latin. For LifeSite News, this is John Henry Weston. May God bless you. Pray for the conversion of the Pope.
Hi everyone, this is John Henry Weston for LifeSite News. We hope you found this video insightful. For more content like this, be sure to check out the links in the description below. You can also follow us on social media to stay updated on the latest news concerning life, faith, family, and freedom. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.